Welcome back to Introduction to Talmudic Legal Logic, and in this lecturette, I'll walk you through the basic structure and substance of rabbinic texts, mostly the Mishnah and the Talmud. The texts that we encounter when we study Talmud together are basically triple layered. We start off with the Bible, which we covered in a previous video. The Bible is written in Biblical Hebrew, which changes a little bit from book to book because the books themselves were written in different periods. There are fierce debates in scholarships about when the redaction happened, but likely the Bible came together as a compendium of books around the Hellenistic period. The Bible is followed by another text called the Mishnah. The Mishnah was composed in Eretz Israel, likely in the Galilee. Indeed, in some times, the place where the Mishnah was compiled, the work on the Mishnah was done, is very, very close to my home in Kiryat Tivon, in a place called Bet She'arim. But likely the final sealing of the Mishnah as a text was redacted around 200 CE. And then there's a text called the Talmud. There are two versions of the Talmud, the Yerushalmi Talmud, which was redacted in Eretz Israel, and the Babylonian Talmud, which was redacted in Babylonia. The Talmud is written in Hebrew and in Aramaic. The Aramaic of the two Talmudim are different. They also were redacted in different periods. So the Talmud Yerushalmi, which was redacted in the Galilee, was probably sealed in its current form around 500 CE, and in Babylonia around 600, 700 CE, although I will say that there are now some scholars who say this might have been even later. Let's talk a little bit about the structure of these texts. So this is what the Mishnah looks like. It's essentially a codex of laws. As I mentioned, it's written in Hebrew, but it's written in a very terse and cryptic way. So it just basically offers you the laws with very little commentary and explanation. The Mishnah is broken down into 6 orders. We call them Sdarim. The Sdarim address different areas of law in the same way that, for example, California would have a penal code, a civil code, a code of evidence, a code of regulations, a code of agriculture, or a vehicle code. In the same way, the Mishnah is divided thematically. So we have Sefer Zraim, which is an agricultural code, Moed, which deals with holidays, Nashim, which deals with family law, Nezikin, which is a compendium of criminal and civil law as well as evidence, Kodashim, which deals with sacrifices, and Tahorot, which deals with purity. Now, each of these orders, Sdarim, contains several tractates, or masachtot. There are 63 masachtot in general. Again, they are thematically divided. Each tractate has its own internal division, but again, they're written in a very terse and very cryptic way. Now, the Talmud is based on the Mishnah. Essentially, it's an interpretation of the Mishnah. And because of that, it's structured in the same way that the Mishnah is. So it has the same 6 Sdarim and the same tractates. The vast majority, but not all, Mishnaic tractates are also covered by the Talmud. The way the Talmud works is that each issue that comes up, they will cite the Mishnah. So all the text of the Mishnah basically is digested into the Talmud. It'll usually say Matni or Mishnah at the beginning. It'll cite the Mishnah, which is very short, and then it will continue to elaborate. Now, how does it elaborate on the Mishnah? There could be all kinds of genres of material. So some of the commentary could be halacha, rules. So they could be basically using legal logic to try to figure out what the rule is, or they might recur to the Bible, or they might use analogies, deduction, induction, like all kinds of logical methods to try and understand what the law is, elucidate scenarios that they think the Mishnah might not have predicted, and try to reason from the Mishnah what the rule is. Another genre of material that you can find in the Talmud is Agadah, stories. So oftentimes, and you probably know this, one of the best ways to teach something or elucidate something or try to understand what's going on is through examples. So you will have either one story that can be like really compelling and then they move back to Haggadah, or they could have to Halacha, or they could have a whole series of Aggadot. Sometimes you have kind of like a whole medley of Aggadot eating up, a big chunk of a chapter of a tractate. There is also a third genre. It's called Midrash. Midrash is essentially a creative exegetic exercise on biblical verses. So this means that they will be digging into the text, digging into the biblical text in an intertextual way. So they will maybe draw some interesting analogies, take, a biblical phrase from one place and compare it to a biblical phrase from a completely different place and create connections that didn't exist before. This is done in a very creative way. Oftentimes, there's a lot of artistic devices that get embroiled into this. It's a very formalized, ornate way of discussing the Bible, and it presents a lot of room for creativity for them. So you find midrashim in the Talmud as well. Now, I should point out that there are texts that date to this more or less the same dates of the Mishnah and the Talmud and are also very valuable. So there's also a text called the Tosefta, which follows the same logic of the Mishnah, has the exact same orders and tractates and commentary. Sometimes the Talmud will be citing from the Tosefta, or will have other versions of what's in the Tosefta. There are also texts called Beraita from the word bata, which is chutz, texts that didn't make it into the Mishnah but are contemporaries to the Mishnah. Some of them are real, and the folks in the Babylonian Talmud might have had them and we don't. Or they might be making them up, which is also possible to sort of lend more authority to what they're saying. In some cases, there is strong evidence that the Beraitot are fake. Alongside the Talmud, there are also some compilations of Midrashim. Usually, these are just midrashim, kind of like it's a collection where you go to and all you get is not rules or stories, but these kinds of very ornate usage of biblical language in an intertextual way. That's it.